I need to congratulate you on the success of Chasing Glory. For me, I think it's an absolutely incredible podcast, and I think it's now 2.5 years old, maybe 2 years old, something like that. I know before that you had Making Their Way to the Ring. I need to ask, what made you actually start the podcast? Or maybe I should ask, what drives you to keep going with the podcast?
Well, yeah, you just said what drives me to keep going, because it's not easy. And I tell people whenever they want to start a podcast, I said, if you don't see yourself in this for 3 years minimum, and just know it's a struggle, it really is, and it's a lot of work, then don't even get started. But I have to say that when I left WWE and my dad was really, really sick, and I stepped away from the ring, I was taking care of him, and I remember him saying to me, it was around September, and I left the beginning of August, and he told me, he's like, Lil, I really don't want you sitting here watching me, be so ill. And at the time, he didn't know he was dying, because they told my sister and I, but we didn't tell my mother and my father, because we didn't want my dad to have to live with that. And so he was still fighting for his life, thinking that he could get well. And oh my God, that time was just so hard for me. But when he was telling me, he's like, Lil, while I'm sitting here trying to get better, I don't want, you just stepped away from WWE. Like, I don't want you to leave your whole life for me. And he goes, what's your next move? Like, I want you to do something. And I had this idea back in 2004 to do these really in-depth interviews of the superstars, because I'd gotten to know such incredible people behind the scenes, but I really realized that no one really gets to hear their stories. And I felt like, God, if people could just hear the struggles that they've been through, and how they've overcome their own journeys, then I feel like it could be so inspiring for others, and it would also connect people with the superstar even more. And so I took that concept. I was already doing a couple things for AfterBuzz TV, so I went to Kevin Undergaro and asked him if I could do the show, and he was just really open about it. And it was initially, like you said, called Making Their Way to the Ring, and that's what we did. And I did some really in-depth interviews from there. After around 6 months, they had introduced me to Podcast One, so I went to Podcast One. And Podcast One was audio only. It's funny, I was doing video before anybody else was doing video really in podcasting. But then I went to audio. Then after a year of that, I realized, like, really want to be on video again. So after our 100th episode, we went to video, and it's turned into what it is now. And I really have to just thank the fans for receiving it the way they have, and especially the superstars for trusting me with such hard and real conversations and opening up their lives like they have, because that's what's made this show so successful. And I'm just really glad that people have been receiving it the way that they have.
Yeah, that's, I think, my favourite thing about it there. You mentioned, obviously, it's very unique because you've got a lot of stories that haven't been told, but obviously you've got a very distinctive voice as well. So that couples it with the heartfelt stories. And the most recent one, which I absolutely loved, was the one with Paige. So, full disclosure, I know you spoke about the Triple H incident on there. I was actually the person who asked the question of Triple H that caused that to come out. And I got to ask Paige about it, and she gave me a very nice answer. But I thought the one on Chasing Glory was a much longer answer. She explained it very well, and I thought her answer was very, very classy. I know you've got the second part of that interview coming up as well, where she speaks about a whole range of things. It seemed like a very in-depth conversation. So I actually just want to know, very easy question, what your opinion is on Paige.
I love Paige. I absolutely love her. I've gotten to know her so well over the years, and to see her evolution as a person and her growth as someone who was young, who got caught up, made a decision that later on backfired, but owned it. That's one thing about Paige that I've been so inspired by, is that anything she's ever chosen to do that hasn't been in her best interest, she 100% owns it. And then she turns around and helps other people that might be making, mistakes, or, like those situations, or putting themselves in those situations. helping them think twice, or if they have, knowing that you can overcome anything. I mean, who of us have not all made one dumb mistake after another, in our lives, whether we drink too much or whether we're hanging out with the wrong people or, but some of us don't get caught on video, for example, doing it. And so it was beautiful in the way that she spoke. I loved that she did get to speak about it on my podcast about everything that happened. And the fact that you were saying, like, Triple H didn't mean anything by it, but to also know the power that words have. And I think it was just a great way to have a conversation so you could see both sides of things. And I just love that we can now be open about what it is to move forward evolution of women, not only athletic wise or in careers, but also in how we speak about women.
Yeah, definitely. And that's the thing I think you said the best on that, was that everything should be about opening a conversation. I've got a bit more on evolution and about the women's evolution later. But obviously you're best known for your work in WWE. You mentioned obviously the tragic reason why you had to leave WWE earlier. But you've done a bit of everything there. You sang, you announced, you were involved in quite a few of the little bits of the entertainment side of it too. One of the last times we seen you was at Evolution. Will we ever see Lilian Garcia back in WWE, even sporadically, or is that a closed chapter now?
I would never say a closed chapter. I never do that to my life. I think that that's a mistake when you just say never. I don't believe in that word. I will say that going back for Evolution was awesome. Last year, going back for WrestleMania for the Women's Battle Royal was great. Hopefully, I'll get to do that again this year, because that would mean that, I was when the Battle Royal got established in the WrestleMania, I was the one that they called to ring announce for it. And then I came back for year 2. So this would be year 3. So it'd be a beautiful thing. And I hope that that's what happens. And I'm all for it. And then I also got called by the PFL, the Professional Fighters League, to be their MMA in-cage announcer, which was so cool to make a bit of a transition and to do something different. And I'm always just open to opportunities. So, but a lot of times I'm not even in control of, some of the opportunities. So I just stay open and see what happens and what comes my way.
Yeah, definitely.
I will say this. I definitely miss the connection with the WWE universe. That's something that will never go away. But I love that people have followed me onto Chasing Glory so I could still feel connected.
Yeah, and you definitely are, and you're obviously connecting people with WWE superstars as well, which I think is absolutely incredible. But I actually recently also found a book. I believe the book is called Divas Uncovered, and it is very of the time. It's got a lot of photos of yourself and a lot of the women who were around in WWE at the time. But it's actually got a lot of really inspirational quotes in it as well. So I need to ask, you share that book with a lot of women who were in WWE maybe 20 years ago. Who would be the standout from then that you think could thrive in today's WWE's women's division?
That's a loaded question. Are you talking about from back then who could, in this day and era?
Yeah, rephrase your just the way it is now. It's a lot more physical. It's a lot more kind of spotlight on the in-ring ability and stuff like that. Obviously, a lot of women back then had great in-ring ability, but there's a much more of a spotlight on it. So who do you think would be the perfect former WWE superstar to be in today's WWE?
Well, I really feel like they all have something to offer. I feel that now the women get such an opportunity to really showcase their talents. So they're given the time, and time in the ring helps them be able to hone their craft. And I feel like if the women back then would have been given the same amount of time, we would have even seen them evolve even more. But, you look at Trish Stratus, for example, she came into this era and boom, she showed that she could totally handle it. There's a lot of them. that have done that. But yeah, it's the opportunity that now they have that's it's incredible, and I'm just really proud that not only have they stepped into the opportunity, I mean, they really have shown that they belong there and that they can do what the men do and be as entertaining.
Yeah, definitely. The reason I actually asked that was because we spoke about you being part of Evolution, and a lot of people have been clamouring for a sequel. But I think Evolution was perfect, and it showed a lot of the veterans essentially, and a lot of the younger talent. And obviously, like you said, there time wasn't an issue. There was so much time on there for the women. But a lot has happened since the first one. Obviously, there's been the first ever women's match in Saudi Arabia, for instance. So I want to ask your thoughts on how do you see the women's revolution progressing from here? Do you think there should be a second evolution? Do you think just more time in general? What do you think is the best thing to do going forward?
I think what's really important is to not set the women apart. In other words, make it a normal, like it's expected that, yeah, they would have a rumble, or yeah, they would have a ladders match and do great. Yeah, they would have a Hell in the Cell match, a chamber match, and do great. Like, it's just expected because they're just great athletes, not just because they're women doing the sport. So I love the fact that it is a progressive evolution where we are just seeing it as, here's the men doing a match, here's the women doing a match, come together. They are just incredible in their stage, right? And they're just incredible athletes. And so we're just accepting both and not making a big deal out of certain things. Now, do I agree that there are moments that you have to celebrate, and the Saudi Arabia moment is something to celebrate? Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's a huge wall to break over there. And I think that's incredible. But when it just becomes normal that we accept women in these positions, I think that's when you'll really see the evolution.
Excellent. And I've only got a couple of questions left. The last one kind of leads on for that, because I think one thing that was a lot more controversial than I thought it was going to be was last week Becky Lynch appeared on WWE Backstage, and she said the best thing for women's wrestling would probably be to remove the word women's from it. That actually seemed to happen with the NXT Women's Championship. It seems to now being just being called the NXT Championship. What do you think of that decision and the possible removal of the word women's before wrestling?
Okay, so it kind of, I didn't get to see her on Backstage, but it's almost saying the same thing I'm saying, right? Where it's just normal. So I think what she's trying to say is, it's like we don't say, and here's the men's world champion, you know? So I think that's exactly what she's trying to point out. Like, it's just a normal acceptance and not something separated.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I've got one last question for you. I want to return to Chasing Glory. You said earlier I'd asked a loaded question. This one might be slightly more loaded. So you spoke about the drive, what makes you keep going with that? I just want to ask, what lies ahead with you with regards to Chasing Glory? We know the next guest is part 2 of the Paige interview. Have you got any more guests you can tell us about coming up that are set in stone, or have you got any plans for it going forward? Well, like I said, with Chasing Glory, it continues to have its own evolution, which is a beautiful thing. And that's because of the fans, because of the superstars that are making this show so successful. And we recently, as I told you before, we went to video, which was a big step. And you can now see the show on YouTube, youtube.com/Lilian Garcia. We have made it very simple. In fact, we have chasingglory.com where you can either listen or watch the show. But I always love to tell people to follow at Chasing Glory on Instagram, because on Fridays we have what we call Glory Friday, and then we announce who is next on that Monday show. And it's fun for people. They've been like, oh, it's so cool. I can't wait for Fridays to know who's coming up on Monday. So it's almost like I don't want to tell you who's coming up because it will give that away. So you have to just follow the Glory Fridays. But I will say that I'm definitely going to continue
getting more superstars on the show. I also like to get other athletes, other entertainers, wellness coaches, sprinkle all these people in, even though some of the fans might not know who they are. I feel like these stories are so powerful that you can always, always learn from someone, even if you don't know who they are. When you give yourself an opportunity to listen to somebody else's journey, you can pick nuggets out of it and then apply it to your life. And that's what we're all here for, is to help each other out, because I've said this before, we don't have a roadmap in this life. And the more that we can help each other by, hey, this worked for me, why don't you try this? Okay, this worked for me, why don't you try this? Then the more joyous our journey here on earth can be.
Yeah, definitely. And I know that the one thing about wrestling fans is they love a compelling story. So if you're bringing that to them, no matter who it's from, they're going to like it.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you.
Oh, same here. Thank you. And say hello to everybody there in Scotland for me. I love you guys dearly.
Most definitely. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye. You too.
Thanks. Bye.